You're listening to Stimulus Tech Talk, a conversation-based podcast created by Stimulus Technologies that covers a range of topics related to business and technology.
Welcome to Stimulus Tech Talk. I'm Sherry Lip, the marketing manager here at Stimulus Technologies, and I am here with Stimulus Technology CEO Nathan Whittacre. And today we are going to be talking about vacation proofing your tech. Welcome, Nathan.
Thanks, Sherry. Appreciate you putting this together.
So, speaking of holidays, we're getting to a time of year when a lot of people take time off, but of course, this applies to any time you might be taking time off. What are the issues with that when it comes to cybersecurity and technology?
Well, just don't take time off, and then it's not a problem. You know, all the no, unfortunately, there are a lot of issues around out of office and taking time away, and hackers know that it's a great opportunity to uh, inf- infiltrate your organization is when especially key people are out of the office. So it's a good conversation to have around preparation for team members being out, whether it's be the CEO or an accounting manager, controller, or operations people, anybody high up in your organization, uh, no matter what size of business you are, it definitely is an issue when you're out of office, especially when you're out of office to a point that you're inaccessible uh, by the team. Just a little history for me on this, and it was an impetus for me writing the CEO's Digital Survival Guide book. Is I took 2 weeks off that I went backpacking in 2018, and I had to prepare my team and my company to have me gone and completely inaccessible. I did not have any technology with me other than a satellite messaging device that allowed me to send some text messages, but I certainly didn't have access to the internet or computers or anything like that for 2 weeks. And it was a big deal. So whether or not that you're disappearing for 2 weeks in the mountains or just taking a nice beach vacation that you don't want to be connected for a couple days, there is some preparation that you have to do to prepare your company for that time away from a technology perspective.
What are some of the biggest issues you see when people are away that maybe people don't really even think about?
Well, there's some obvious ones that happen. If you set an out of office message on your Outlook, hackers are constantly sending you spam and they'll get a response stating that you're out of the office. And so they're going to take advantage of that and try to connect with, for example, your accounting manager or your payables person to convince them to pay a bill that isn't real. They'll might impersonate you using false email addresses, maybe text your employees directly and ask them to do something they wouldn't necessarily do. Everything from going and getting, 10 Amazon gift cards or what, ACHing or wiring money to a vendor that doesn't exist. They're going to try to communicate with your team and impersonate you. Other way that they can find out if you're out, even if you don't put an out of office message, is they might be monitoring your social media accounts. So I recommend not posting any information about being out until you're back home to social media because there may be hacked accounts that are your friends. Maybe your account settings aren't set up correctly and you have public information about you being on vacation. So I really don't recommend anytime that you're traveling to have information available out there so that hackers can know that you're gone. And they're going to use that information again against you to socially engineer your organization to convince people there to do things that they wouldn't necessarily do. So that's really what happens: is owner goes away, and the evil cats will play, and organizations will get potentially hit by hackers impersonating the person that's out.
So you're saying not even to put your out of office. If you're going to be gone a long time, do you put that on still, or do you just try to rely? If you're not going to have access to email, do you put that on, or you don't?
Well, I have been. If it's an extended period of time where I'm not going to be accessible via technology for a period of time. If it's 1 or 2 days, probably not. But what I do is I warn my team that I'll be out and that they'll probably get messages from me, which I will not send them. I'm not going to send a random text message to ask them to buy 10 Amazon gift cards while I'm backpacking in California. So that's certainly not going to be on the top of my mind. So just warn the people and say, if you get any communication from me, don't rely on it. That's not going to be something I'm going to be worried about. I would use normal lines of communication if I'm out, whether it's, using the, normal communication that we use inside the company. Uh, but I'm not going to send text messages to my employees and ask them to do something they wouldn't normally do. Um, and then one of the other things you have to think about doing is you have to set up a backup plan inside your organization of how things are going to occur. So if you are, let's say you're the approver for payroll or for payments to vendors, if you're part of the approval process and you're the last approver, you need to have an alternative person to do those approvals that you have confidence in. So there's still two levels of authentication inside all those financial approvals. I think in this sense, I'm really mostly concerned about financial fraud when an owner or a chief financial officer or some other person with financial controls in the business goes away. You want to make sure that you have secondary ways of providing uh, multi-factor processes for approving payments. That's again where I think hackers really jump in is getting your team to do something they wouldn't normally do, and you have to set up mechanisms around that if you're going to be away.
Yeah, and I think we've probably all experienced the one person who's unreachable is the only one who knows how to. You realize they're the only ones who knows how to access something or do something, and I've had it where somebody was out on FEMLA and they're like, you literally can't talk to them, so you can't even. You don't want to disturb somebody on their vacation, but in this case, like they're like, you can't talk to them. So, how do you how do you help businesses prepare for that kind of thing?
That's another good point. So that was the other part of me leaving for that 2 weeks is I had a lot of institutional knowledge. At that point, it had been 22, 23 years of operating the company. And there were certain things that were still in my head rather than down on paper. And so to get around that, you need to make sure that you have everything documented. One of the big ones that comes up is, I think, as you mentioned, like a password or authentication, maybe a two-factor authentication into an account, and that could be a problem. So one of the ways that we get around that today is having a good password manager that you can have shared passwords between employees stored securely in a password manager, including two-factor authentication. It is a huge pet peeve of mine that some financial institutions or credit card companies still only allow one username and password to log into those accounts. They don't allow you to have multiple users set up on some of these accounts. And I don't know why these financial institutions do it, but they do. And if it's one user that has that information and they're the ones that are going to be out of office, or maybe the two-factor authentication is going to their phone, like you said, if they're on FMLA or something like that, that you just can't get a hold of them, or you're not supposed to by law, to get that authentication, you have to have an alternative method. And password managers allow that group access to those and securely control that multi-factor authentication and track who's accessing those passwords and when. So in the event that a person leaves, you can go into that password manager and look to see what passwords they've accessed and go in and reset those. So that's a good way, much better way than what companies often have done is store them on spreadsheets. And the spreadsheets work you know insecurely to store the passwords, but they don't work for the multi-factor authentication. And so using a password manager gets around that. So that's a good point that you brought up, is like accessing data. You have to have it documented, but you want to document as securely, especially from a password standpoint.
And I've talked to some people who are nervous about password managers. Is there any security issue there?
There that is a concern. So the one that we have issues with is if you're using a web browser as your password manager. So if you have Chrome or Firefox or Safari or Edge, one of those browsers that is, pops up and says, "Hey, you want me to store this password for you?" Don't do that. Use a good password manager, LastPass, 1Password, Bitwarden, one of those. And there's several others that are good. And what they do is they encrypt the passwords in a vault. And now hackers could potentially get access to the vault. There have been some password managers that have been compromised, that the hackers get access to these vaults, but they're encrypted fully, and so they would have to know the decryption sequence to pull down the data, and it's very difficult to do. So I think it's much better, especially if you're using things like Excel files to store passwords. This is a much better way to store passwords than older methods like sticky notes or Excel files, or stuck in somebody's head that they have to use the same password on every website because you can't remember thousands of passwords in your head unless you're some type of savant. And then you can do it. But
Do you still see sticky notes in people's offices of passwords?
yes. It's oh, it drives me nuts. Yeah, still see sticky notes in people's offices. Um,
So you might as well not really actually have a password.
no, no. It's been a few years, but there was a company that we were interviewing to be one of our clients, and they were, on laptops that they would take out in the field. They had the passwords stuck to the monitors or the keyboards. And I couldn't believe it. And I asked them about it, and they said, "Well, we just don't have a better way." Well, there's certainly a better way, and it's using a password manager. So uh, definitely from a team organization standpoint, you can have shared passwords, which is excellent. You can have your individual password vault, and it's all very secure. So highly recommend that over many other options.
If you're gone and there's some kind of incident, how do you prepare the team?
So I guess it depends on what the incident is. But if you let's take for instance, if you have an inside IT guy, and we've had a couple of podcasts now on, you know, having a single IT guy or an internal IT person. Um, Inside your organization, and that's a lot of concern. They want to take a vacation, they should take a vacation, and what happens when they're out. um, it's one of the reasons why we recommend having multiple people in either the IT outsource company that you're working with or in your internal IT department. You should have backups in the event that your lead person goes away, and they should have access and be able to do everything necessary. If you do just have one internal IT person, then hire an outside company that works with them, that is, cooperative and can support your IT person that you have internally if they go on vacation, which they should do. So everything should be documented. I mean, a lot of the questions that come up is, how do you get access to systems? What are the usernames and passwords to get access to, you know, um, domain controllers, firewalls, whatever it may be. All that should be documented in some type of management system that another person can access. And there should be very little difference between the person that is working on it day to day and the backup that comes in and works on it. So having things like a run book in place, that there's everything that's documented that needs to happen, and somebody without any prior knowledge can generally follow that run book. From like an incident management standpoint, that's part of a lot of the compliance and cybersecurity frameworks that are out there now, is to create good documentation on what happens if there is some type of incident, whether you're there or not to control it. And if you follow the playbook that's developed, everybody should know who to communicate with, how to communicate, what needs to occur. And there's no questions through the process. You have it documented. You pull out the emergency manual and you follow that. And whether it's having to restore a backup because the system went down, or recover from some type of ransomware, or even accidental file deletions, there should be um, a playbook on what occurs. You shouldn't have to invent it when the emergency happens. It should have been thought about and planned uh, well ahead of time so that you can just execute rather than having to run around with your hair caught on fire trying to figure out what happens.
And do you actually, I don't know the right word, but practice with companies for these types of scenarios or sit down and run through the playbook as
Yeah,
if this is
that's what's
happening?
called yeah, tabletop exercises. So that's part of, putting a compliance framework. If you're implementing NIST or CMMC or some other type of compliance framework, that is part of the process, is doing tabletop exercises and saying, okay, this happened today. What are we doing now? And you go through it with the team. They don't generally take very long, a half hour to an hour to run through it, make sure everything makes sense. Sometimes you catch things like, oh, that person's no longer here, or that vendor that we were supposed to contact is no longer our contracted vendor, so we need to update the playbook. So doing those tabletop exercises allow you to make sure that everything makes sense, that you can execute on it, and all the information is current. So running through that periodically, depending on your compliance framework, it could be quarterly, every 6 months, annually, but it should be done. You should pull that out and make sure that you can run through it successfully by doing a test exercise on it.
And going back to when you were gone for 2 weeks with just the satellite phone, what made you feel confident in that? And did you learn anything from that?
I think the most of the learning was getting the team up to speed on all the things that needed to happen that I did on a day-to-day basis while I was gone. And so it was a good opportunity for me to get a lot of things out of my head. I wrote a lot of documents during that time. Um, I think what worked is I had a great team around me. I had people that could execute well on um, the operating the company, and I had full confidence in them. I think it was very scary for the team. They didn't like it, but it was a good learning exercise for everybody, for me and the team, realizing that the company can continue operating without me around for a couple of weeks. And it's a good question that we have, is what happens if I get hit by the proverbial bus, and hopefully just in the hospital for a couple of weeks or maybe a couple of months recovering. But if something happens to me beyond that, can the company survive? And it allowed us to put plans in place in the event that maybe something more catastrophic happened than me choosing to go on a 2 week backpacking trip. So I think it's a good opportunity for every business owner to think about how their business operations would continue in the event that they're no longer around or available to make decisions. And it puts a lot of trust in the team and builds, I think, some really good visibility of maybe deficiencies that the team and or the owner has caused, and allows you to correct them. So doing this, whether you just tabletop exercise like I mentioned it before, or actually just take the time and just say, don't contact me, I won't have a cell phone during that period of time, or computer, or whatever it may be. What you do as a leader is you are able to delegate outcomes and not create anxiety among your team if you have a great plan in place. And I think it makes you a much better company moving forward.
And have you ever been able to encourage somebody who is afraid to leave, based on your own experiences, and encourage those business owners who are a little nervous about it?
I have. I've had a couple of opportunities with friends and other people to take the time away, and it's that's one thing. It's interesting as you grow as a company. Um, as I've done M&A and talked to a lot of M&A advisors too, is that's one thing that that an acquirer looks for in a business is the ability of the team to operate without the owner around. And it's always a concern of an acquirer and puts less value on the business if everything revolves around the founder or CEO or the operator of the business. They you have to be replaceable, especially if somebody's going to invest or buy your company. And so you create a much more valuable business if it can operate without you, which seems counterintuitive from an owner standpoint, but it's really, in the end, you build a great business and you should be able to take some time away. And I think it's more important that the team can take some time away too. There should be an opportunity for team members to feel confident, um, that they can take some time off and that their work is not going to just pile up and wait for them at the end. That things happen while they're gone too. So especially for your key people, finance, operations, different people should have the ability to take some time and feel comfortable that things work while they're not there. And I love to see business owners and even friends of mine that aren't business owners but are employees and in different businesses to take that time away. I just had a friend of mine that kind of took some inspiration from me and hiked a couple of weeks on the Camino de Santiago in Spain and had an amazing trip. Um, and it's just taking that time away to reflect and refresh is an amazing part of life. And I think all of us should take that opportunity when we can.
I've known a couple people to do that hike and they loved it. Are you planning that ever, Nathan? On a personal note?
My wife and I have talked about it. Now, we have talked about an interesting bend on it that we would run it
Oh,
rather than just hike it. So, yeah, I think it would. I'm always looking for different adventures, so something to do in the future.
all right. Well, and to close it out, what's your biggest tip for people who are, getting ready to maybe step out of the office for a little bit, business owners?
Just get things documented and get a team in place that can execute on it well, so that you can go away and not worry. So that's the most important thing. It's just really taking the time to unwind because you, as a leader of a business, your team is relying on you to have strategic vision, to set the goals of the company and the direction that you're headed. And you have to be refreshed and you have to be charged to do that. And taking that time away allows you to reset and be your best when you come back. So take the time and really enjoy your time away. So hopefully, over the next couple of months, you have some opportunities to take some time away and enjoy the fruits of your labor.
All right. Well, thank you, Nathan, and great advice as always.
Thanks, Sherry, and thanks everybody for joining us.